Okay, so imagine this. You got a time machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
You zip back to the Paleolithic era,
Okay.
maybe like 100,000 years ago, and you plop down a plate of chicken nuggets
Yeah.
and a supersized soda in front of a caveman.
All right.
What do you think his reaction would be?
I mean, I'm betting confusion at the very least.
Yeah.
Maybe even disgust.
Probably.
Who knows?
So today we're going on a deep dive into how human diets have evolved
Okay.
from those hunter-gatherer days to our modern food landscape that we have now.
Fascinating stuff.
The goal here is to really understand what those changes mean for our health.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating is that the paleo diet craze that we see
Right.
actually has a point, you know? Like,
Right.
it's not all just hype, but it's often oversimplified.
Right.
You can't just slap a label on something and call it a day.
Yeah.
There's real scientific evidence behind why the way our ancestors ate kept them thriving.
It wasn't just about woolly mammoth steaks, although I bet those were tasty.
Our sources mention that they regularly consumed
Yeah.
over 100 different plant species in a year.
It's amazing.
That's crazy.
Wild.
I mean, think about that. That kind of dietary diversity is unheard of today.
Oh, totally.
I mean, do you think that the average person even eats 100 different foods in a year?
Right.
Let alone 100 different plants?
It's a really stark contrast when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
And I think that variety that they had provided such a massive spectrum of nutrients,
Yeah.
which is something we often lack in our modern diets.
Right.
We rely very heavily on a handful of staple crops.
Mm-hmm.
And while that is efficient for feeding a lot of people,
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily translate to optimal health.
Right. And it wasn't just what they ate,
Right.
but it's also when they ate.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There's this concept of caloric roulette,
I've heard of that.
where food wasn't always just readily available.
Mhm.
You know, a successful hunt meant feasting,
Yeah.
but lean times meant, well, fasting.
Right, right.
So it kind of makes you wonder if those cycles are something that our bodies are still somewhat programmed for.
It's really interesting to think about how the human body has evolved over millions of years
Yeah.
to thrive in an environment that is so vastly different from our own.
Right.
It's kind of like trying to run modern software on an ancient computer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are bound to be glitches.
So are you saying that, like, trends like intermittent fasting are tapping into something primal?
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility.
Okay.
Of course, we have to be careful about drawing direct comparisons.
Sure.
But it really does raise an important question about how constant access to food,
Yeah.
which is a relatively new phenomenon in human history,
Right.
might be impacting our metabolism and our overall health.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit.
Okay.
No pun intended.
Uh-huh.
To the agricultural revolution.
All right.
So humans start farming.
Yep.
And suddenly food is more predictable, right?
It seems that way.
Like, we can grow it. We
Right.
can count on it.
More or less.
But there's a trade-off involved, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So what was that?
Well, while agriculture did allow for larger
Uh-huh.
and more stable populations,
Right.
the shift to just a limited number of staple crops,
Mm-hmm.
like wheat and rice,
Mm-hmm.
meant that people were getting less overall nutritional variety.
So more food,
Yeah,
but potentially lower quality food.
that's the trade-off.
Yeah. Is there any evidence to support that?
Well, there is actually.
Okay.
Skeletal remains from this period tell a fascinating story.
All right.
We actually see a decrease in average height,
Oh, wow.
weaker bone density,
Interesting.
and even an increase in dental cavities.
Wait, more cavities?
More cavities.
Even though they didn't have candy bars and soda? That seems so counterintuitive.
It is very interesting.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that their diet being so rich in fibrous plants
Yeah.
acted like natural dental floss,
Ah.
scrubbing away plaque.
Okay.
And then moreover, the absence of refined sugar
Mhm.
meant that their teeth weren't constantly bathed in enamel-eroding substances.
Wow, so their primitive diet
Right.
is actually better for their teeth than our modern one.
In some ways, yeah.
Even with all of our fancy dental care.
It's true.
It makes you wonder what else we've gotten wrong.
It really does.
And then, of course, we get to the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah.
which really throws things into overdrive
For sure.
in terms of how food is produced and consumed.
Absolutely.
So the 19th century rolls around,
Yeah, right.
and suddenly we're talking about processed foods,
Yep.
refined flour,
Uh-huh.
and, drumroll please,
Uh-huh.
sugar.
Sugar.
The amount of sugar that entered the human diet during this period is truly staggering.
It really is.
Our sources say that people went from consuming
Okay.
roughly 22 teaspoons of sugar per year before industrialization
Wow.
to the equivalent of a daily latte today.
That's a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
It's wild.
What were some of the long-term consequences of this
I mean,
drastic increase in
Sure.
sugar consumption?
there's a strong correlation
Okay.
between increased sugar consumption
Hmm.
and the rise of chronic diseases
Okay.
like type 2 diabetes,
Okay.
heart disease,
Ugh.
and even certain types of cancer.
Wow.
Now, it's a complex issue, of course,
Yeah.
many contributing factors.
Yeah.
But the overabundance of sugar in the modern diet
Hmm.
is undoubtedly a major concern.
So we've gone from foraging for 100+ plant species
Yeah.
to basically mainlining sugar.
It's quite a journey.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah.
And it's not just the addition of sugar, right?
Right.
We also started removing
Oh, yeah,
a lot of the naturally occurring nutrients from our food.
precisely.
Yeah.
So the Industrial Revolution also ushered in all these advancements in food processing,
Okay.
with canned goods becoming more readily available.
Right.
So these developments, while convenient,
Mm.
further distanced people from whole natural foods,
Yeah.
stripping away all those valuable nutrients in the process.
So it's not just what we're putting into our bodies.
Right.
It's also what we're taking out.
It's both sides of the coin.
But hold on, before we get too deep into the doom and gloom,
Okay.
our sources dug up some pretty interesting
Right.
and kind of shocking
Oh?
facts about how modern food is actually designed to keep us hooked.
Yeah, this should be good.
So get this, 60%
Okay.
of the average American diet
Right.
is made up of ultra-processed foods.
That's a lot.
These are basically foods engineered for
Yeah.
like mouthfeel
I've heard that term.
and craveability.
Oh, yeah.
They're designed to override our natural satiety signals
Mm-hmm.
and make us want to eat more even when we're full.
Well, it's like the food industry has hacked our biology.
Yeah.
They figured out how to create products that hijack our taste buds and keep us coming back for more,
Yeah.
even if it's detrimental to our health.
See, it's kind of scary when you think about it.
It really is.
So what can we do about it?
Well,
Are we doomed to a life of battling our cravings?
I don't think so.
For these frankenfoods.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
There are steps we can take
Right.
to regain control of our diets
Mm-hmm.
and make choices that align with our health goals.
Okay.
But first, I think it's important to understand the extent
Okay.
to which the modern food landscape has been engineered to work against us.
All right. So tell me more
Let's do it.
about how these ultra-processed foods are so different from what our ancestors ate.
Okay, so for starters, they're often loaded with added sugars,
Okay.
unhealthy fats,
Mm-hmm.
and artificial ingredients that our bodies simply aren't designed to handle.
Yeah.
You know, these substances
Yeah.
can disrupt our hormonal balance,
Uh-huh.
lead to inflammation,
Okay.
and contribute to a whole host of health problems.
So we're basically overloading our systems
Yeah.
with stuff that's not even really food.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
And to make matters worse,
Yeah.
these processed foods are often stripped of the nutrients that our bodies need
Right.
to function properly. It's like trying to build a house with flimsy materials.
Perfect analogy.
You might be able to construct something that looks like a house,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be structurally sound
Right.
or stand the test of time.
Exactly.
So we're building our bodies with these nutritionally bankrupt ingredients,
Yeah.
and then we wonder why we're experiencing all these health problems.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And to make matters worse, the food industry has become incredibly sophisticated
Oh, yeah.
in its marketing tactics,
Absolutely.
using all these psychological tricks
Yeah.
and persuasive language to convince us that these processed foods are actually good for us.
It's very convincing.
It's no wonder we're all so confused about what to eat.
Right.
We're bombarded with these conflicting messages from every side.
It's tough to navigate.
But don't worry, listeners.
Uh-huh.
We're going to unpack all of this in more detail
We'll break it down.
and provide you with some practical strategies for navigating the modern food landscape. Stay tuned for part 2. Welcome back to our deep dive into the evolution of human diets.
Okay.
Before we went off on that cliffhanger,
Uh-huh.
we were talking about how ultra-processed foods are basically designed to keep us hooked.
Right.
But it's not just about the engineering, right? There's
Yeah.
a whole cultural shift that happened
Oh, for sure.
alongside these changes in food production.
Absolutely. We've moved from a world where food was primarily a source of sustenance
Yeah.
to one where it's often seen as entertainment,
Yeah.
you know, a reward, a way to cope with stress.
Like emotional eating.
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
even a form of self-expression.
Oh, okay.
Like, oh, look at this beautiful meal I made.
Oh, totally.
It's become a lot more than just fuel.
Yeah, it's true. And think about how many social gatherings revolve around food.
Oh, totally.
I mean, birthdays, holidays,
Yeah.
even just catching up with friends often involves
Yeah.
like a meal or snacks.
Right. And it's not inherently bad.
Right.
Food can be a wonderful way to connect with others.
Yeah.
And celebrate life.
For sure.
The problem arises when we start to rely on food to fulfill emotional needs that it's not really equipped to address.
So how do we disentangle those emotional connections to food?
Right.
I mean, it feels like we're kind of hardwired to seek comfort and pleasure from eating.
I think it's not about eliminating those pleasurable associations altogether.
Okay.
Food should be enjoyable, right? But it's about finding a balance and recognizing when we're using food to cope with something deeper.
So it's about becoming more mindful of our eating habits.
For sure.
And understanding the underlying motivations behind our food choices.
Exactly.
But let's get back to those ultra-processed foods for a sec. You mentioned they're loaded with added sugars, unhealthy fats, and artificial ingredients.
Right.
What kind of impact do those substances have on our bodies?
Well, for starters,
yeah.
they can really disrupt our metabolism, making it harder to maintain a healthy weight and increasing the risk of developing chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes.
So we're overeating.
Yeah.
And yet many of us are still malnourished.
It is a paradox.
It's crazy.
We're consuming record-breaking calories.
Yeah.
But many of us are still deficient in those essential vitamins and minerals.
Yeah.
Because these processed foods are so calorie dense.
Right.
But nutrient poor.
It's like we're filling up on empty calories. Our bodies are starving for real nutrients while we're simultaneously stuffing ourselves with junk.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, many of these processed foods contain substances that are actually harmful to our health.
Okay, so give me some examples.
All right. Well, one example is trans fats,
Okay.
which are created through a process called hydrogenation.
Okay.
And these fats have been linked to an increased risk of heart disease,
Yeah.
stroke, and other health problems.
Okay, I've definitely heard of trans fats.
Yeah,
They're supposed to be really bad for you.
they are.
But aren't they banned in many countries now?
Yes. Many countries have taken steps to restrict
Okay.
or ban the use of trans fats in food.
Okay.
However, they can still be found in some processed foods.
Really?
So it's important to read labels carefully.
So trans fats are out.
Right.
What other villains should we be looking out for on those food labels?
Another category to be wary of is artificial sweeteners.
Okay.
So these chemicals are often added to processed foods and drinks to make them taste sweet without adding calories.
But aren't artificial sweeteners supposed to be like a healthier alternative to sugar?
Right.
I mean, they don't contribute to weight gain?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But the research on artificial sweeteners is actually pretty mixed.
Oh, really?
Some studies suggest that they may actually have negative health effects,
Oh, wow. Like what?
such as disrupting gut bacteria,
Oh, interesting.
increasing cravings for sweet foods,
Okay.
and even contributing to metabolic disorders.
So even though they don't have calories,
Right.
they might still be messing with our bodies in other ways.
That's the concern.
Wow.
And then you have all the artificial colors,
Right.
flavors, and preservatives that are added to processed foods
Yeah.
to enhance their appearance, taste, and shelf life.
So it's like those additives might not be directly harmful,
Right.
but they're not exactly doing us any favors either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's best to minimize our exposure
Yeah.
to these artificial ingredients whenever possible.
Okay. It seems like the more we learn about processed foods, the more reasons we have to avoid them.
It's true.
But let's be realistic. I
Okay.
mean, these foods are everywhere,
They are?
and they're often marketed as being convenient, affordable,
Mm-hmm.
and even healthy.
Right.
How do we make better choices
That's
in a world that seems designed to tempt us at every turn?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah,
It's a complex issue,
it is.
and there's no easy solution.
Right.
But I think the first step is awareness.
Okay.
The more we understand about how these processed foods are impacting our health, the more empowered we are to make informed choices.
So it's about education.
Yeah,
Arming ourselves with the knowledge we need to make better decisions.
exactly. And it's not just about knowing what to avoid.
Okay.
It's also about rediscovering the joy of real food, of cooking from scratch,
Yeah,
and savoring the flavors of whole, unprocessed ingredients.
that's a great point.
You know?
It's like shifting our focus from deprivation to abundance.
Exactly.
Instead of thinking about all the things we can't eat,
Right.
we can focus on the incredible variety
Yeah.
of delicious and nutritious foods that are actually available to us.
And remember, small changes can make a big difference.
That's true.
You don't have to overhaul your entire diet overnight.
Right.
Start by making gradual, sustainable changes.
Okay.
Like incorporating more fruits and vegetables into your meals, choosing whole grains over refined ones, and cooking at home more often.
So it's about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely.
And it's about finding what works for you and your lifestyle.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to healthy eating.
Exactly. It's about listening to your body.
Yeah.
Paying attention to how different foods make you feel.
Right.
And making choices that support your overall well-being.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so.
But we're not done yet.
Uh-huh.
In part 3, we'll explore some specific strategies for implementing these changes.
Sounds good.
And overcoming the challenges of modern food culture.
Right.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the evolution of human diets.
All right.
We've gone from hunting and gathering to the rise of agriculture.
Yeah.
And finally to the industrialization of our food system.
It's been quite a journey.
But understanding the history of food
Right.
is only useful if we can actually apply that knowledge to our lives today, right?
Exactly. We can't just magically transport ourselves back to the Paleolithic era.
Right.
We have to figure out how to thrive in the modern world.
Yeah. With all of its conveniences.
For sure.
And let's be honest, temptations.
Sure. So let's break it down into some actionable steps.
No.
If our listeners want to start eating in a way that's more aligned with how our bodies evolved,
Yeah.
where do they begin?
One of the most powerful things you can do is take control of your food environment.
Okay.
Think about it.
Yeah.
If your pantry is stocked with chips, cookies, and sugary drinks, you're setting yourself up for a constant battle of willpower.
So you're saying step 1 is basically like a kitchen makeover.
Precisely. Clear out the processed junk
Okay.
and replace it with whole, nutrient-dense foods.
Like what?
So stock your fridge with fresh fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
Keep a variety of nuts and seeds on hand for snacks. And make sure you have plenty of lean protein sources.
Yeah.
Like chicken, fish, and beans.
So it's almost like we're setting up our kitchen to resemble what a Paleolithic pantry might have looked like.
Yeah, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Yeah.
But if those healthy options are readily available and visually appealing,
Right.
you're much more likely to reach for them when you're hungry.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
But what about when you're not at home?
Yeah, that's tough.
Let's face it, we live in a grab-and-go world.
We do.
How do you resist temptation when you're out and about,
Right.
surrounded by fast food and convenience stores?
Well, preparation is key.
Okay.
If you know you're going to be out for a while,
Yeah.
pack healthy snacks and meals to take with you.
Okay.
A piece of fruit, a handful of nuts, or even a simple salad
Yeah.
can make all the difference in preventing those impulsive, unhealthy choices.
So it's like you're packing a survival kit
Huh?
for the modern food landscape.
Yeah, I like that.
You're out there battling temptation, but you've got your healthy snacks to keep you on track.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of social support.
Oh, that's a good point.
Let your friends and family know about your goals.
Okay.
Ask for their encouragement.
Yeah.
It's much easier to stay motivated when you have a support system.
And I imagine it also helps to find ways to make healthy eating enjoyable.
Oh, for sure.
It shouldn't feel like a chore or a punishment.
Absolutely. Explore new recipes,
Yeah.
experiment with different flavors,
Yeah.
and find ways to make healthy eating a pleasurable experience.
Okay, so those are all great tips for setting yourself up for success.
Right.
But let's talk about the mental game for a moment.
Okay.
Even with the best intentions, it's still so hard to resist those tempting treats.
Yeah.
Especially when we're stressed, tired, or just feeling indulgent.
You're right. Willpower is a finite resource. And it can be very easily depleted,
Yeah.
especially in our modern world,
Right.
where we're constantly bombarded with temptations.
Yeah, it's everywhere you turn.
Exactly. That's why it's important to develop strategies that don't rely solely on willpower.
So what's the alternative?
Okay.
If willpower isn't enough, what else can we do?
One strategy is to reframe your thinking about food. Instead of viewing healthy eating as a restriction or a sacrifice, focus on the positive aspects.
So focus on the benefits, not the restrictions.
Exactly. Think about how good you feel when you nourish your body
Yeah.
with whole, nutritious foods.
Another helpful technique is to practice mindful eating.
Oh, that's a great one.
So what does that involve?
This means paying attention to your food, savoring each bite,
Okay.
and tuning in to your body's hunger and fullness cues.
Yeah.
When you eat mindfully, you're much more likely to make conscious choices
Okay.
and less likely to overeat.
So mindful eating is a way to bring that awareness back into the eating experience.
For sure.
Which is something we've kind of lost in our fast-paced, distracted world.
Precisely. And don't beat yourself up if you slip up occasionally.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Everyone makes mistakes.
For sure.
The key is to learn from those slip-ups and get back on track.
Progress, not perfection.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great mantra for anyone trying to improve their health.
I agree. And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. It's about making gradual, sustainable changes that you can maintain over time.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today.
I hope so.
We explored the evolution of human diets, uncovered some shocking truths about the modern food landscape.
It is pretty shocking when you think about it.
And most importantly, provided some practical strategies for making healthier choices.
Exactly.
So I think if our caveman ancestor could see us now, he'd be both amazed by how far we've come and concerned by how far we've strayed from our roots.
Yeah, probably a little bit of both.
But I think he'd also be rooting for us to rediscover the wisdom of our ancestors and reclaim our health.
I like that. And to our listeners, I say this.
Yeah.
Eat like your life depends on it, because it does.
That's some great advice, and that's a wrap on this deep dive.
Awesome.
We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration of a topic that matters to you.